We're in John chapter 19. If you'd like to go ahead and turn there, we'll actually begin in chapter 18. Go back and pick up some things there in chapter 18. But we're trying to work our way through the Gospel of John, and we did a pretty good job of it because we've been taking about a chapter at a time, and here we are almost through, not too many more to go. Jesus is arrested at the beginning of chapter 18. You have in chapter 18 also Peter's 3 denials and Jesus' first appearance before Pilate. And as you move on into chapter 19, you have the continued meeting between Jesus and Pilate. And in chapter 19, then, Pilate is going to turn Jesus over to be crucified. As you begin this interaction between Pilate and Jesus, there are actually, beginning in verse 28 of chapter 18, there are 4 questions that I want to look at as we begin. Think about these 4 questions. As you begin in chapter 18, verses 28 through 32, and one of the things we did last week is we really quickly went through verse 31, and that got us through Peter's denials and Jesus before Pilate. But want to go back to verse 28 through 32 and see the first question. There are 4 key questions, I think, that are asked in this interaction between Pilate and Jesus. So let's look at the first one. That's in chapter 18, beginning in 28 through 32. Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. So Pilate went outside to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered him, "If this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." The Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken to show by what kind of death he was going to die. So that first question is there early on in that conversation when Pilate asked the question, what is the accusation against him? If you'll notice in the English Standard, he says, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" So the Jews leave the high priest residence and they move toward the Roman governor's palace. Now, the Jews don't enter in, they stay outside. By the way, when you read chapter 18, beginning in verse 23, and you complete that reading through chapter 19, notice how many times there's an inside and outside. There's this coming in and going out, because Pilate has talked to the Jews, and they can't come in. And normally they would come in and sit, or they would stand, or there would be this conversation going on inside the palace of the Roman governor. But this is unique. It's a constant back and forth that takes place. But notice that as you read it. But here Pilate comes out and he asks, what is the accusation? Did you notice their response was very vague? It was, I think, interestingly, probably vague on purpose, but we're going to look at another one that's not quite so vague. We're going to see some very specific accusations. But the accusation that they bring against him is simply this: if this man was not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you. What are they saying by that response? What are they communicating by that kind of response? Yeah. We need time to figure it out, or I'm not going to tell you. What else? Why did they answer that way? Are they kind of saying, just trust us, just trust us? Yeah, no, it's not. That's not important. Don't worry about it. I can see John doing that. Hey, don't worry about it. don't worry about it. It's yeah, it's not really any of your business. Don't question our judgment. That's kind of the attitude they have. We brought him to you. We have something against him, and the specific matter against him is not that important. Now, let me just state right here that as you look at the four Gospels and the account of the trials and the account of the crucifixion itself, they're going to vary quite a bit in the details and the specifics and how it moves through that, though all of them deal with the crucifixion of Jesus very briefly. Interestingly, John gives this answer from the Jews because I believe one of the things that John is dealing with here is that difference between belief and unbelief. He's dealing with that. He's bringing that into play in every chapter, in every way he possibly can. He's bringing that into play here because there's this tug of war between belief and unbelief. And the Jews bring Jesus to Pilate, the Roman governor. What's the accusation? And their reply is, he's done evil, and we wouldn't have brought him to you if he hadn't. Well, then Pilate says, well, if he's done evil, then you take him and judge him by your own law. Now, understand that the Romans had taken away some of the Jews' authority, but usually the Romans would allow a conquered territory or a conquered nation or conquered city to do a lot of their own governing, and as long as there was no ruckus and no uprising and no rebellion, and as long as they paid the taxes, they let them pretty much go ahead and rule their own subjects. The problem is the Romans didn't give them the authority to officially do any capital punishment. So here is the reason for them bringing Jesus to Pilate, and that is that the Romans have to kill Jesus. The Jews can't do it because if the Jews did, they would do it by stoning him to death, which would not be in harmony with the Old Testament prophecies, as well as how Jesus himself, as is described here, gave how he would actually be crucified or be killed. And so the crucifixion has to take place. Therefore, it has to be the Romans that do it. And so to fulfill the prophecy and fulfill as God has planned it out, Pilate's offering for them to take Jesus and try him by their own laws is rejected. Because they're not trying him just as a person who's done wrong. They're trying him as a person that they want to die. They want him to die. Now, remember last week we talked about Caiaphas, the one who had already determined that Jesus would have to die, because he's the one that said that it is the right thing, it is a good thing that one man die, even if he's innocent, to save the whole nation. That universalist idea of what's best for the whole, even if it means killing an innocent man, that would be the view that you have there. So he had determined a long time ago that Jesus had to die. So in the trial in the house of the high priest, there was no real decision that was going to be made there. That decision had already been made. Oh, yes. Yeah, on the outside. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And when it's convenient, they had no problem killing somebody. Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't going to be that long till they would kill Stephen, stone him to death, and they didn't have to worry too much about that one. They didn't take Stephen to Pilate. They killed him on the spot. Yeah, good observation. So they're bringing him to Pilate because this is what they consider to be a criminal case. Rome would have then been responsible for taking care of this formal complaint from the Jews, and then the case would proceed as was the custom of the Roman courts. The problem is Pilate was only a tool in the hands of these Jews. Look at verse 29. So Pilate went outside to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you." Pilate said, "Then you take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." The Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." Now, the next things that are going to happen beginning in verse 33 is where Jesus is going to begin to ask questions of Jesus. So here's my question. When I look at that, it appears to me that Pilate understands that he is a puppet in the hands of the Jews. Is that the way it comes across to you? That Pilate kind of gets the idea that I'm being played here, that I'm being used? That may be why he says, "You take it." There might be just any other time when Pilate would be delivered a man that was obviously a criminal that he wouldn't think twice about sending him to the Roman courts. But this time he does. So it may be that he recognized how he was being used and that he had been involved in this religious wrangling between the Jews and Jesus and the followers of Jesus and all that. All right, look over at Luke chapter 23. And Luke is going to record some, what we might call official charges. And he records 3 of those. Look at 23, I'll pick up in verse 1, 23, 1 and 2. Then the whole company of them arose and brought him before Pilate, and they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this man," number 1, "misleading our nation," number 2, "forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar," and number 3, "saying that he himself is Christ a king." Okay, so you have Luke's account of what's taking place here in John's account. And when Pilate comes out and asks about the accusations, they give these 3. He led the nation astray, he forbids us to pay taxes to Caesar, and he claimed to be, ESV says, he claimed himself, that he himself is Christ a king. Those might have caught Pilate's attention, but they didn't. Because still, when John records it, John says, Pilate said, "You guys take him." Mm-hmm.
Just take it and deal with it yourself. And then okay, well, if that's what it's going to be, then here are the 3. And if that's the case, then Pilate does, they're playing kids.
Mm-hmm.
They're serving back.
That's true. It is, yes. So this politics they're playing, the back and forth. And Gary's observation says this might be what was said once he told them, "You go ahead and take Jesus and deal with him yourself." It might be that Luke records the moment after that offer by Pilate where they actually brought forth some accusations, these 3.
It does seem to precipitate the conversation that Pilate had with Jesus.
Right. It does, yes. It really does. It seems to fit more if you're looking at where it might fit in John, it really does seem to fit after verse 32, somewhere in that region. Well, the problem is that all three of these are false accusations, and we can go back and look at those and be very aware of how they are false accusations. When you talk about that he led the nation astray, he had in no way ever tried to subvert the nation of Israel. As a matter of fact, he was what would be considered a good Jewish man all of his life, and he was a part of that blessed nation of the Jews. And sure, he attacked the Pharisees because of their wrong living and their hypocritical lifestyle, and he was teaching against some of the customs of the Jews, but there's nowhere that he ever was subversive against the nation, either politically or religiously. Secondly, in Matthew 22, he actually taught the opposite of not paying to Caesar. He said, "Render to Caesar that which is Caesar's, and to God that which is God's." His claim to be a Jewish Messiah and the King, well, part of that is true. He actually did claim that in a sense, but not politically speaking. The comparison that they tried to make, which was, if you don't do our bidding as a puppet, Pilate, then we're going to tell Caesar that there was one running around here who claimed to be king, and you didn't do anything about it. But Jesus never claimed to be a political king. He never in any way claimed to have any authority from that perspective politically. Say it again. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Anytime anybody was trying to lead a rebellion against the Romans, they were going to be a hero for sure. Okay, look at the second question. This is verses 33 through 38. So Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the King of the Jews?" Again, as Gary observed, and I believe rightly so, that conversation that we read from Luke 23, verse 2, may have taken place right before this, because the first thing that Pilate asks him when he goes in is, "Are you the King of the Jews?" So that's the second question. Are you King of the Jews? So as they go back inside the palace, Jesus is inside with him, and he asks this question, "Are you the King of the Jews?" Notice Jesus' response. Verse 34, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" That seems to fit. Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from this world." That's through verse 36. So in verse 33, the question is asked by Pilate, "Are you King of the Jews?" What was Jesus' response to that question? Just briefly. Yeah? Where did you get your information? Is kind of what Jesus asked. Did somebody put that question in your head? Well, right. And so then Jesus finally does really come down to an answer when he says, "My kingdom is not of this world." Is he admitting that he is king? He is, isn't he? I have a kingdom, sure. I'm a king, sure. But it's not like you're thinking. It's not anything like you're thinking. and he doesn't say this, and it's not even inferred here, but I can put myself in this conversation, and I can almost hear Jesus want to say, even if I told you, you wouldn't understand. Don't you see that? Even if I told you about my kingdom, you wouldn't understand. All right, so that second question is, are you king of the Jews? Look at verse 39, and actually, we're not going to read all of this, but 39 through chapter 19, verse 7 is the context for this third question. And notice what happens here beginning in verse 39. After he had said this, he went back out to the Jews and told them, I find no guilt in him, but you have a custom that I release one man for you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews? There's a third question. Do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews? Now, it was the custom. It was something that had been done evidently for some time, and it had become a custom that there would be a prisoner released at this time. Pilate's question is responded to, it seems, very quickly. There's no thought that has to go into their answer. There is no discussion that goes into their answer. The answer is very quick. They cried out, not this man, but Barabbas. Now, Barabbas, there's a lot of ideas about who Barabbas was, an insurrectionist, thief. He was not a good man anyway, no matter how you look at him, but they chose Barabbas over Jesus when they were asked, who do you want me to release during this time? You want me to deliver Jesus, the King of the Jews? No, not this man, but give us Barabbas.
My brother preached a sermon one time on Barabbas, and made the point that Barabbas is us, because he's the guy that deserves to be apparently in prison. Maybe he's on death row. Maybe he deserves to be crucified, and yet Jesus is going to die as an innocent person, probably on the cross that probably should have been Barabbas. And that's where you and I should be. And you can just picture, maybe, down in chapter 19, the crowd starts yelling, crucified, crucified. Was Barabbas in his cell at the time, thinking, uh-oh, they're probably
Yeah.
behold, this other guy taking it to the cross. It was a way that I hadn't thought about.
Yeah. It's a good observation, and one of the things that the Bible does often is it gives us these illustrations that are smaller than the larger picture, and this is one of those where you have Barabbas, who Jesus is being the scapegoat for. He's taking Barabbas' place, and he's going to die. Though Barabbas is the one who deserved to die, he's going to die. Okay, sure.
But the English Standard Margin, where it says now Barabbas was a robber, the margin says for an insurrectionist, which would have been the exact thing that they were accusing Jesus.
Yes, that's what I've always seen, was that he was very much a one who had probably led an insurrection against the government and therefore deserved to die. Yeah, for sure. Okay, look at the next question, 19 verse 8. If you read all of those verses, you'll see where there's still this politicking going back and forth, and the chief priests and the officers cry out, crucify him, crucify him. Pilate said, take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no fault in this man or no guilt in him. The Jews answered him, "We have law, and according to that law he ought to die because he has made himself the Son of God." When Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. He entered his headquarters again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, "You will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" Jesus answered him and said, You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." So that fourth question then is when Pilate asked, "Where are you from?" Where are you from? There is no answer. There is no answer. Jesus does not answer. Pilate says, "You're not going to speak. You're not going to answer." Verse 10. Pilate then presses the point, doesn't he? He's sticking out his chest and he's beating his own chest to express his great power that he thinks he possesses. So he expresses to Jesus this fact: don't you know that your life is in my hands? That's literally what he says, isn't it? Your life is in my hands. Now, that didn't sit very well with Jesus, because Jesus had been quiet. When he asked him, "Where are you from?" Jesus could have gone into a sermonette, or whatever he could have gone into to talk about, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and he could have gone any direction. "I came from my Father." He could have said anything, but he didn't say anything. He didn't even speak. But when Pilate says, "Your life is in my hands. I can take your life or I can give you life," Jesus said, "No, that's not the way it is. You have no authority over me. None. You have no authority over me. Unless it is given from above, you can't do anything." And actually, all of this had been set into motion by God Himself, Jesus agreeing with the Heavenly Father. You have the Garden of Gethsemane, and you have Jesus then coming to the realization that what's going to happen next is going to happen, and He's going to drink this cup of suffering. And He says, "I am going to go through with this because that is my choice. That is my Father's will, not because you have any authority whatsoever." Mm-hmm. Right. It's interesting to consider for sure when we're able to look back and see it all and know it all before it even takes place. And here's Pilate in the middle of it, puppet in the hands of the Jewish leaders. But also, this is God's plan. This is the way it had to be. Well, there's some angst that goes on after all of this, and you're well aware of Pilate's wife and all that goes on afterwards when he washes his hands. And so there's something that's going to be, at least in his mind, that this is something that seems to have been much bigger than I ever thought it was, maybe when it's over. Yes. So he was afraid of the Jews. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No fault, yes.
His job was to maintain the peace. And, you know, he could see in his mind the revolt taking place, and then he was going to be in trouble. Don't you think on some level that Jesus let him know, you know, you do what you have to do, it's okay.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I think that very statement is, those who have delivered me over to you are the guilty ones. Yeah. Yeah. Tommy, you had some comment?
Well, I'm just going to make a statement. Personally, I think in the back of old Pilot's head, he kept remembering what his wife had told him.
Mm-hmm.
She said, "You better leave that man alone." That's
Right.
just man.
Right.
He kept wanting to turn it over.
He did. He tried what, 3 times to turn him loose. Yeah. Yes. Fear of the Jews, fear of the Romans, fear of losing his place, fear of losing his life, however you want to view it exactly. Yeah. What'd you say? Yes, he was. Well, it could have meant losing his position, and many times it would mean losing his life. So it was not just they were going to move him to another place. It could be more serious than that. Right. Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. I think you're right. Okay, so those are, when I looked at those 4 questions, it kind of helped me to kind of summarize what's taken place here in the end of chapter 18 and the beginning of chapter 19. And so finally, what we have after all of this, verse 12, is Pilate again trying to release Jesus, and the Jews then come back with this response, that you are not Caesar's friend if you choose to release him, because this man makes himself a king and opposes Caesar. There's their threat that, we're going to tell him that he claimed to be king, you didn't do anything about it, so you're going to be in real trouble. And then the end of verse 16, verse 16, so he delivered him over to them to be crucified. So they took Jesus and went out, bearing his own cross, to the place called the Skull, also Golgotha in Aramaic. There they crucified him with 2 others, one on either side, and Jesus between them. And you have the inscription, King of the Jews. The chief priests didn't like that, and he said, I've done what I've done. What's written is written. And when the soldiers crucified Jesus, they gambled for his garments, and as was prophesied, the one garment would not be torn. They gambled for it wholly. So the soldiers did these things, and then you have the verse 25 begins to describe those around the cross. You have his giving the oversight and the authority to care for his mother to John. One of those statements from the cross is, "Woman, behold your son, behold your mother." Then the last, then another statement is, "I thirst." And the last statement is, "It is finished." The phrase "it is finished" carries with it the idea, the word "finished" there is the word final. It's over. It's done. There's no more. It's done. It's an abrupt ending. That's how Jesus would say, my mission here has been accomplished. All right. Any observations through that? We still have Jesus' side being pierced in the next paragraph, and in the last paragraph you have Jesus being buried. Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus take his body down and bury him in that borrowed tomb, as was prophesied as well. Any observations? Our time is almost gone.
So the Jews said, "Don't put that on our slave." He said, "I am the King of the Jews." I think Pilate understood something more was going on there. And then when they said, we can't kill him, he'll have to.
Mm-hmm.
He knew that, he
Right, exactly. Yeah, one of the things that was done is when a criminal was crucified like that, they always put his offense so that people would know what he had done, what he was accused of, and what he had been convicted of. And so Pilate, almost an in-your-face kind of decision, puts King of Jews. That was one of those three things that they said was his accusation, right? From Luke 23, verse 2. The last one of those was he claimed to be king. Okay? Yes. One of those ironic statements of truth, isn't it? Yeah. It is, yes. Mm-hmm. I find it very interesting and telling about who Jesus is that even as he hangs on the cross, this is another one of those very small moments that tells us of a much larger picture. But one of the things that Jesus does as he hangs on the cross is to make sure his mother is taken care of. So I find that quite telling of who Jesus is, that he would use his last breaths to make sure his mother is taken care of. Yes. There's a lot to be said. I'm glad you brought that up, Brandon. There's a lot to be said about the human side of Jesus. And that's one of the things that John is doing as well when he's working through writing this gospel, is he's showing the human side of Jesus. He's showing that Jesus was both human and God in the flesh, because there were those who didn't believe that. So his humanity is showing as he weeps and as he feels the anxiety of what's about to take place. And now he's there on the cross. He's the oldest son in the family. And now he puts the care of his mother in the hands of John, the disciple whom Jesus loved. Okay, read from 18, what was that, about 7 or 8, through chapter 19. And it gives you a pretty good picture of the trials of Jesus, and gives you a good picture of everything that took place before Pilate, and the crucifixion and all that's around that.